All right, so buckle up because we're diving deep into Genesis chapter 12.
Ooh, Genesis 12, huh?
You know it. We're talking Abram, journeys of faith, those big ancient promises, the whole shebang. But we're going deeper, past the surface level.
I like it.
Because let's face it, most folks kind of know the basic gist of the story. So we're not just going to rehash the obvious. This isn't just a Sunday school lesson about believing,
Right.
This is about digging into the nitty-gritty, the human side of things, the struggles, the tough choices, even a little bit of, dare I say, political maneuvering hidden in there.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing how much this one chapter sets the stage for everything that comes after in the Bible. I mean, we're talking foundational stuff here.
Yeah.
This is Judaism, Christianity, all those roots go back right here.
No kidding. It's huge GE, and it starts right off the bat. Bam. God tells Abram to pack it up and move to Canaan. Not just a little weekend getaway, right?
No, not at all.
He's leaving everything he knows, everyone he knows, based on this promise of what the land will one day mean for his descendants. Talk about a leap of faith.
And, to add another layer onto that, we have to remember something people often forget.
What's that?
Canaan wasn't just some empty field waiting for him. It was already inhabited. The Canaanites were there. So God's promise, it wasn't like, here you go, instant gratification.
Yeah.
This was a long game. It required serious trust and stick-with-itness from Abram.
Like saying, this awesome gift is yours, but you're going to have to work for it.
Exactly.
And work he does. But before we get to that whole saga, let's break down those promises. Because God lays down three major ones, right? Abram's going to become a great nation, get a super famous name, and be a blessing to every single family on earth.
And these aren't just vague, nice-sounding things. Those promises, they echo down through history. You can draw lines straight from them to, well, everything. The establishment of Israel, the whole lineage that leads to Jesus. It all circles back to Genesis 12.
Talk about a ripple effect, huh?
No kidding.
Okay, so Abram, he sets out. He's got his wife, Sarai, and his nephew, Lot, tagging along. Now, I got to ask about Lot. What's the big deal with him being there?
That's a subtle detail, but it's important. Lot represents the next generation, right? It's hinting at the whole idea of faith being passed down, stories moving through families. And the text actually emphasizes this, It specifically mentions parents teaching their children about all the things God's done. It's like, and you make faith last. You got to make sure each generation is passing it on.
Makes sense. Don't reinvent the wheel every time.
Exactly.
So they arrive in Canaan, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Abram starts building altars to God.
Yep.
Not just one and done either. We're
Yeah.
talking multiple times throughout his journey.
Yeah.
It's like he's creating these spiritual checkpoints as he goes. So what's the deeper meaning? What's with all the altar building?
You're spot on. It's way more than just praying. This is about claiming the land, marking it. Each altar is like this physical declaration. This is for God, see. It's a reminder of God's presence, and it's almost, a little defiant too. Remember, the Canaanites are right there.
Yeah, good point. Talk about a bold move. But speaking of challenges, things take a turn for the worse, like major bummer time. A huge famine hits.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about testing someone's faith. Abram has to pack up again and go to Egypt just to survive.
And this isn't just, we're a little short on food kind of famine. This
Yeah.
is serious stuff. It really pushes Abram to depend on God like never before. Talk about a test.
Makes you think, was it meant to be a test? Like, did God send this famine on purpose? Was it some kind of consequence? Or just, life back then was rough?
It's a question people have been debating for centuries.
No kidding. And then, just when you think things can't get more complicated, they arrive in Egypt, desperate for help. Well, Abram makes a decision that's ethically questionable, to say the least. He tells Sarai to pretend she's his sister.
Yeah, about that.
And I know technically she kind of was way back in the family tree, but still, not exactly the most honest move.
You got to admit, it's a really uncomfortable situation. Morally complex,
Yeah.
I mean, always got to remember the context, right? We're talking about a different time, different culture, very real dangers, life and death stuff. People made choices we might question now, but back then, they didn't have the luxury we have.
Yeah, that's fair. It definitely makes you think, puts things in perspective. These weren't perfect people, that's for sure. They were just trying to survive, and sometimes they messed up, but hey, that's what makes them relatable, right?
Fully.
Anyway, you can probably guess what happens next. Sarai, she was a beautiful woman, and in Egypt. Well, that kind of attention doesn't exactly go unnoticed.
You can say that again. And that's when their faith is really put to the test. Like, imagine being in their shoes. Sarai is taken to Pharaoh's house talk about a dangerous situation, so much uncertainty. And Abram, he's terrified, but he still has to trust that God will protect them. And Sarai, she's in an incredibly vulnerable position, but she has to trust her husband.
And protect them, he does. But not exactly how you'd expect. Whoa, talk about a divine smackdown. You can't tell me Pharaoh just shrugged that off. I mean, it really makes you think about how seriously people took the whole idea of gods and goddesses back then. It was real. But did Pharaoh actually believe Abram was chummy with God? Or was it just the whole plague thing that scared him straight?
You know, that's a fascinating question. It makes you realize how different their worldview was back then.
Yeah.
We think of supernatural stuff as like stories, but for them, it was woven into everything.
Yeah.
Seeing those plagues, it wouldn't have been some abstract idea. It'd be like, okay, this God is the real deal.
No kidding. And Pharaoh, he definitely learned his lesson the hard way. Sends Abram and Sarai packing, right? But not only that, he lets them keep all the stuff they'd gotten while they were there.
Right.
Kind of surprising, right? You'd think he'd at least try to hold on to some of it. Like, oh, well, this is for all the trouble or something.
Yeah, but you got to figure he'd be too freaked out to even try that. He'd be like, nope, get out of here. Don't want to make this God angry again.
Makes sense. But it got me thinking, this whole Egypt detour, what's the takeaway for us today? I mean, plagues aren't exactly a regular Tuesday thing anymore.
True, but the core idea, it's still relevant. Think about it. Abram and Sarai, they were all in on their faith, right?
Yeah.
But this still went through tough times. Had to make choices, some of
Yeah.
them. Oh, we talked about that. The point is, they were tested, pushed to their limit. But their faith, it didn't break.
It's a good reminder that believing in something, it's not a free pass on problems. It's about trusting in something bigger, even when, or maybe especially when, you're not sure what's going on.
Exactly. Holding on to that belief when everything's falling apart, that's real faith. And don't forget, this story, it shows us how complicated people are, even Abram, right? He does something out of fear that puts Sarai in a really tough spot. It reminds us that these biblical figures, they weren't perfect, they messed up, and honestly, that makes them more relatable, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. Makes their journey feel more, I don't know, human. Like, we could be in that story too, you know?
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect. It's about stumbling through and trusting there's something bigger guiding you.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for anyone. We're not supposed to judge the choices people made back then. We're supposed to learn from them. Their good times, their bad times. It's all part of the journey.
So to sum it up, we've got ancient history, divine showdowns, and some really relatable human struggles, all in one chapter. But wait, there's more. This is just the beginning for Abram and Sarai. They've got a long way to go before that promise of a nation happens.
Oh, for sure. This is just Act 1. They've got more challenges coming. Their faith is going to be tested in ways they probably can't even imagine. And their understanding of what God's plan is, it's going to evolve. And as we keep going in Genesis, we'll see even more layers of this story. More about what it means to be human and how powerful faith can be.
You know, it's wild to think this whole story went down thousands of years ago, but it's still, like, relatable, you know?
So,
We're not out here building literal altars in the desert or anything.
right.
But those moments where your faith, your beliefs, they get put to the test. That's real life stuff.
It's what makes these stories so powerful, I think. That universality, you know? Like Abram and Sarai, yeah, they're these major biblical figures,
Right.
but they're also just people. Struggling, messing up, having those moments of doubt. It's all so human, and that's something everyone can connect to.
It's like, no matter how much times change, some things stay the same, huh?
Exactly. And their journey, it wasn't some easy, straight path either.
Yeah.
They had to figure things out as they went.
Which honestly is kind of reassuring in a weird way. Like, if they can stumble around and still come out okay,
Right.
then maybe the rest of us can too.
Exactly. Think about it. They left everything they knew based on a promise. And what happens? Famine, having to run for their lives, making choices that, well, we're still talking about them today, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to just say, forget this, throw in the towel. But they didn't. They held on to that belief, even when things got really, really tough.
So what you're saying is faith isn't about having it all figured out.
Yep.
It's not about never having doubts or hitting roadblocks.
It's about what you do when those doubts hit. That's where faith becomes real,
Deep stuff. So we've covered a lot of ground here. God's big promises to Abram, all the ups and downs of their journey, what it means to have faith when things get messy. Oh, and how do you even obey when you have no clue what's coming next?
Right.
It's all connected. And this covenant, this agreement made thousands of years ago, people are still shaping their lives around it today. It's incredible.
And that's the thing about Abram and Sarai's story. It reminds us that faith, it's not a finish line you cross. It's a journey. And trusting
believing, even when it's hard and you're not sure why. That's what it's all about.
What a journey it's been. We started with those familiar verses in Genesis, but look where we ended up. New ways of seeing this ancient story and how it still matters today. And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive. But hey, the conversation doesn't have to end here, right? What parts of this story really stuck with you? What questions did it make you ask about your own journey? Keep digging, keep thinking about it, and trust me, you'll find even more layers to uncover. Thanks for coming along for the ride, everybody.